Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fearless and Fabulous podcast. This is the space where we talk about women who are thriving no matter their age or size. And I am your host and creator, Melanie Robinson. I am so excited to have a guest who I've had here before, but she's got some big new news in her life, and I just could not wait to get her on here. I want to present to you all Mrs. Personality Canada of 2025, Jewel. Say hi, Jewel.
Hello, I'm so excited to be back.
I'm excited to have you and to have you with this beautiful new crown. If you're listening on Spotify, I just have to tell you all, she has this beautiful crown on. She's got her sash on. She just won this title about a month ago, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about it. But for people who may be new to my channel, can you give us just a little introduction of who you are, Jewel?
Yeah, so my name is Joel Foreman. I'm a grade 3 French immersion teacher by day, Mrs. Personality Canada by night. It's kind of like my alter ego. Uh, because a lot of staff are like, really? I didn't know that. But I've always loved teaching, loved education, and I had very positive teaching role models in life. So I'm so grateful that I'm able to give back now as a teacher with my students and connect in that way. And one thing that I've noticed in my personal life, as well as even in students as young as 8 years old, is we put a lot of pressure on doing everything and being perfect all the time when that's just not sustainable and it's not attainable. So, my personal passion is the bloom effect and teaching others how to bloom, how to live with balance and lead with heart. So, while still having those amazing goals for yourself, also taking time to slow down and not be afraid to say no to things.
Oh my gosh, that is like music to my ears right now. I am winding down my reign as Ms. Voluptuous International, and I've had to be very mindful of trying not to say yes to too many things as well. I took on 3 classes at my university this year, and between that and some family commitments, plus winding down my reign, I've had to be very careful of not overextending myself because it's so easy to burn out, isn't it?
Oh yeah. So easy, especially in teaching in Canada, the stat is 1 in 3 will leave their field within 5 years due to burnout.
Wow.
And so as a teacher, I see that, but I see it also just in women in general. We often are in very caregiving roles. We are wanting to do as much as possible to, nurture ourselves, but also take care of others. And it's so easy to forget ourselves at the center of that, forget what we're doing to actually take care of ourselves. And then that does lead to burnout.
Yes, and matter of fact, today I was watching a reel with my coffee, as I like to do. I like to look at some reels on Instagram while I'm drinking my coffee, and one of them had a speaker, and I forget what her name was, but she was talking about how it's somehow a strange badge of honor for a woman to be described as selfless.
Hmm.
And and she made a really good point on how the word selfless means to not put yourself first before anyone else, to serve everyone without expecting anything in return, to always put everyone else's needs at first. And on the surface, that sounds very noble, right? But when you think about it, it's really giving the message of always put yourself last.
Yeah.
And I think that can be kind of harmful to tell women to always put themselves last.
Oh, absolutely. And I see it, like I said, even with kids as young as 8, oftentimes I fall into these negative stereotypes sometimes as a teacher where I grew up being the quiet girl who always had to be beside the louder, typically
Mm.
boy classmates because they were louder. And, I was, oh, just do this for the teacher, just be the good example. And what it was at the end of the day teaching me was not to advocate for what I needed, which was a quieter space or somewhere closer, especially when without my glasses. Before I got them, I couldn't see and I was being moved
Oh
everywhere.
my goodness.
And now I am very mindful of it as a teacher. And I tell my students, you don't have to do it publicly. You don't have to say, like, I don't want to sit beside so and so, but you are allowed to come to me and say, I feel better in this space or I need this to be successful. Because we often do that with, unfortunately, a lot of women, but just a lot of softer personality traits I find
Right.
get mistaken of just go with the flow and it's okay and we don't want to rock the ship. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to advocate for yourself, and we can do that in a respectful way. And I think that's really what my focus is it doesn't have to be scary to say no, and it doesn't have to be rude.
I absolutely love that. And I think you make a really good point that, people who are a little more soft-spoken or maybe more introverted, it does not mean that they are okay with whatever you give them.
Yeah.
Like they're not used to advocating for themselves as much. So
Hmm.
has that been more of a focus for you with your platform, is just trying to get maybe those quieter personalities to not be afraid to speak out and advocate for what
Hmm.
they need?
I think the biggest focus shift in the past year has been that personal relationship. So knowing if you're a quieter personality, or even for some of our extroverted people, it can be really scary to set a boundary or know even what you want your
Mm,
boundary to be. And so my main focus over the past 6 months has been building that personal relationship with yourself first and knowing what you need, because we do live in a society, like you were saying, that gives a badge of honor of like, oh, you're so selfless, you're so easygoing. And yes, there's merit in being flexible and easygoing, but that doesn't mean that in order to be easygoing, you can never advocate for yourself. And it doesn't mean you can't ever say, like, well, I don't like that. And so, a big focus of my platform and my reign has been creating those reflection points where you can actually sit with yourself and say, okay, well, this is what I need in order to be
yeah.
successful. And that was a big thing for me, pageant week. In the past, I felt like anytime we had downtime or free time, I would always try to push myself to go mingle and be the center of the party, which is just not who I am at all. I'm a very shy and timid person. Most people don't believe me in pageantry because you meet me and that's not how I am, but I need my recharge time. And so this was the first time in 8 years in the industry where I was able to say, no, I'm gonna go to my room and just listen to music and not feel bad about it. And that was a big scary step, but it was a
Mm.
necessary step.
And I think that is a really big lesson that you took for yourself and being able to be honest and what your needs were. And
Mm.
before we started recording, we started talking a little bit about your new title and the differences that you made. So you've been doing pageants for a while. Let's hear about what was it that you had to do to make some shifts, to put yourself in a different direction so that you were really set up for success for going after this title that you currently have.
Yeah, it was the most different preparation I've ever had. In the past, I've always done the external work, the runway, the perfect interview strategy, knowing exactly how I'm going to look and how I'm going to talk. And oftentimes I would put the inner work on a back burner. Anytime my coach would be like, let's talk about your successes, I was like, ah, no, it's fine. We're just like, give me the strategy and I'll apply it. But what was ultimately happening is then any fears that I had or any little triggers that I wasn't working through were then just being exasperated pageant week. So in
Mm,
my competition before Mrs. Personality Canada, I was the oldest delegate. And I was very insecure about it because I had technically aged out of the Miss division and I had created this narrative in my head. And instead of working through it and creating that relationship of why I still belonged at that competition, I just kind of pushed it down and was like, no, no, I'm gonna have the best runway. I'm gonna have the strategy and interview, and then that will be okay. And lo and behold, walk into pageant week, and one of the hotel staff asked me, well, are you sure you're here for the pageant? You seem a little old. And I was like,
oh no.
there it is. I was like, oh,
Oh
okay.
no.
And it was harmless in nature, but because that was an insecurity that I was already battling and I didn't have that foundation of, no, this is why I deserve to be here, it set off everything. And it did not matter that I had a good runway. It didn't matter I had the strategy because what was shining through was my lack of confidence in myself.
Mm.
And so in preparation for this competition, yes, there was still, try your heels on. Don't try your heels on for the first time pageant night, but that's a recipe for disaster. But
Right.
it was also, okay, how do I show up? Who am I? And what am I bringing? Especially since I just got married last year. I am now more established in my career. It was, who am I? And why do I deserve to be here, regardless of what the outcome is? Because different judges, different day, the outcome could
Right.
have been different. But I knew going into finals night that I was proud of everything I had done. And that was the first time I genuinely was like, regardless, I'm happy to be here.
That's amazing, Jewel. I think you know, so much of what you're saying is resounding in me, and I'm sure it's resounding in a lot of people who are listening to this because we are our own worst enemy. And whatever insecurities we have, we amplify it in our own brains, and that becomes our story that we listen to. And I don't know if you've ever listened or read Brene Brown by chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she talks a lot about that, is listening to a story that we've made up on our own heads, and it's
Mhm.
not necessarily true at all. And what we have to do to try and break through that. So you mentioned during pageant week, you took time for yourself. You took some time away. What was it that made that so scary for you to actually take that time for yourself?
Think I had created this narrative that, beauty queens and pageant girls, they were outgoing and always ready to like help and be on 24/7, so to speak. And that also probably comes from teaching full time. We're expected
Mhm.
almost to always put on a show and be happy when we're humans at the end of the day. And so for me, I created this idea that in order to win, I had to always be seen. I had to always
Mhm.
be heard in that space where I felt 100% comfortable this time to say, "No, I'm gonna go take a good, very much needed nap," because, you know, pageant week is a lot. And because of that, I was able to show up more authentically and actually have fun in those moments where we were having parties, we were just hanging out with the girls, as opposed to just kind of powering through and ultimately reaching that wall by the end of the pageant where I'm miserable and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I
Yeah.
didn't reach that this time. I was genuinely like, I want to keep going. Like I'm tired, my feet hurt, but I just want to keep vibing here.
And I remember as well during my last pageant is I I just needed to do all the work ahead of time and just feel nice and ready so that I could be present during
Mhm.
pageant week and not feel that I'm overthinking this and worried
Yep.
about that and being unsure of something, that I could honestly just be in the moment and enjoying the women around me. Because the last thing that I wanted is to feel like I missed it all because I was too much in my head. Is that something that you were trying to strive for?
Absolutely. I always had the goal in mind of, oh, I want to take it day by day and not just focus on I have to do this, and final night I have to do this, and what about this? And I find when you aren't feeling rooted in who you are, you're
Hmm.
focusing more on the external. So it matters more to you, or at least in my personal experience, how I'm going to perform prelims, how I'm going to walk, what about the stage pattern, because I wasn't rooted and I hadn't done that work of who I am. Because I can look back on the videos now and go, I didn't have a perfect performance. I wasn't perfect by any standards, but what was consistent was that I was showing up in every day, every aspect of competition as myself.
Yeah.
And so because I was 100% rooted in who I was, why I was there, and why this title mattered, I was able to just kind of breathe and be like, okay, we can have fun.
Yay, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I what I'm interested in is, have you felt any sort of internal shift from being a single woman to a married woman? Have you felt anything different since you've been married?
Yes and no. It's kind of weird because I'm like, the significance is there for me and my husband that now we're husband and wife.
Hmm.
And I definitely think because our lives are much more intertwined legally, like taxes are filed together now, all that fun stuff, there's definitely a shift in that front. But we are still, because we both have been together for such a long time and know who we are, we're both ourselves and we both
Hmm.
support and complement each other. I will say though, for this title, they meshed the Ms. and the Mrs. division. And I remember telling my coach, I was like, if I win, I don't want the Ms. title. I want the Mrs. title. Like, I'm a married woman. And so that was the only time I was like, no, no, no. Like, I'm married. I got the ring on my hand. Like, I want that Mrs. sash.
What would you say is the biggest difference you have felt since getting married? Like you mentioned earlier, how you feel like you're taken a little more seriously. Do you think that is something that's kind of become more prevalent in your everyday life?
I definitely think we look at married women a little bit more seriously, or we approach them a little bit different. I know there's two sides to that. Of some people approach me like I'm an adult, even in being a teacher, going from mademoiselle to madame, I noticed a shift in how I was approached as the teacher because it was, oh, you're not just a young teacher, you're now a married teacher and
Mm.
established. So there is that, but then there's also the flip side of, oh, you have to be a good wife and you have to do this. And getting the
Mhm.
questions of my husband wasn't able to travel to Calgary with me due to just personal reasons. And a lot of questions of, oh, well, you're leaving him at home or he's not with you. And so there is the serious aspect. I felt like being in the older division, we were, the role models and we were looked up to and kind of let go of a little bit. Like they let us do our own thing because they could trust us. We were all
Yeah.
adults. And then there's also the flip side of like, oh, but when are you having kids? Or what do you want? And like these are conversations I feel like in a Miss pageant you wouldn't have
Yeah.
necessarily. And I'm very open to have those conversations, but it's also on the flip side of why is this now being approached as a conversation?
And that's something I've always found really fascinating about being a single woman and then becoming a married woman, that now your identity is all tied into the quote unquote expected wife things.
Hmm.
And one of them being becoming a mother. And
Hmm.
I've always wondered why there is always this shift in a lot of people's eyes where you suddenly have to become a certain way of being, where
Hmm.
you're the same person, you have a different title now, you're in a partnership. And it also makes me think about, the women who just they choose not to be married and
Hmm.
why aren't they being taken seriously? Uh, just because they're not in a married relationship doesn't make them any less credible.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I is you've mentioned there like it shifts because I said like my husband and I talked about having kids prior to marriage and this was something we established. And so if you asked me as a single woman the same question, the answer would have remained the same, but I find it's approached differently as a
Yeah.
married woman. And even, you know, the fact that there is Ms. and Mrs. the distinguished, even though I was like, I do want the Mrs. I do want that. It's the fact that it's like, oh, we're separating. You're all the same age, you have the same lived experiences or like similar, but you're legally partnered up with somebody versus you're not. And that was interesting as well. So I did appreciate how we ended up just being one division. And yes, we did get to choose our respective title, which I appreciated because it gave us some ownership of,
Hmm.
if you win, what would you rather? Would you rather Ms.? Would you rather Mrs.? And it didn't matter if you were legally married, they would have given you Ms. had you preferred that title, or vice versa. I did compete with a girl who was getting married and said, oh, I want the Mrs., even though I'm not legally married. So I did like having the merge of just, the same type of lived experience. We're in the same spot in our lives, whether or not we're legally married. We're the same type of woman where it's, we've done all our schooling, we're in our careers, and now we are talking about the same sort of things. And I also found that the vibe was very different with the contestants because,
Mm.
yes, we talked about husbands and kids, but it wasn't the center focus of a lot of our discussions. It was, all the lived experiences and how we got here and what we went through as young women, especially for me, I was, growing up in the era when social media was just starting to take over and we didn't know really how to monitor it for kids. And all of a sudden it was all those teen movies that, glasses and curly hair is bad and you need to straighten it and all of that. And so we all got to discuss like what it was like growing up or being
Yeah.
a young adult in that time frame and how that shifted. And so yes, motherhood and wifeship is part of who I am, but it's not the center of who I am.
Amen to that, sister. I love that. I think that is a message that so many women need to hear, that they need to know that, hey, yes, maybe I'm married, but it doesn't mean that's the end of who I am. I have so many facets to me. I still have so many more experiences to pursue and to grow on. And if you're not married, it doesn't matter. You're still growing, you're still developing, you're still an amazing woman no matter what
Hmm.
path in life you take. And you brought up social media, Jewel. So one of the things that I always like to ask people on my show is, especially in regards to pageantry, do you think there are some expectations of women who are pageant gals, the way they should represent themselves on social media. Do you think it's unrealistic or do you think we're hitting the right mark? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely some expectations. I don't know if they actually necessarily come from the organizations or if it's those internal stories we've created. Because I've faced in the past this idea that I always have to have my hair and makeup done. I always have to have the right lighting to post.
Yeah.
And especially, in a crown and sash, I gotta look my best. And I love getting dolled up in that full glam as much as the next gal, but I'm also not a makeup girly. I can't really do my own makeup. I
You
really
heard it
can't.
here. Shockers, a pageant woman who doesn't really do makeup.
I really can't. I was struggling through pageant week. Usually my sister travels with me, and so I was sending her photos and I was getting feedback from her because I was like, "Does this look right?" And usually it was no. That no. But what the way that I present myself in my daily life is usually minimal makeup to no makeup, very natural, very, low, not low effort, but just like comfort. I'm a teacher. I'm like, some days I just gotta be comfortable.
Right.
So in the past, the narrative I've tried on my social media is very like, oh, it has to be perfect. It has to be this perfectly polished look, where that's not me. And if you run into me on the street, that's probably not going to be the version of me you're going to see. And so with personality pageants, I find they really advocate for showing up as who you are, both in
Mhm.
the pageant and then also on social media. So we had tons of social media challenges and they were helping us build engagement, but at no point it was perfect lighting, perfect hair, perfect makeup. It was talk to the camera, do this. Like, how can you interact? And so I think we are hitting the mark in that sense where we're moving away from this idea that we need to be perfect, but there's still that some of that narrative that
Yeah.
exists that we believe, we have to look a certain way before we post and we have to have the filter on. It's so easy to just, I'll just put this filter with makeup on and no one will know. No one will know.
Well, and it also brings up the point that so much what we're seeing now is AI generated.
Yeah.
And that's something that really does not sit well with me at all, because it calls into question, like, what can we trust what we're seeing? And what I'm hoping a lot of pageant systems I hope they're trying to avoid really getting into that trap because right now it is so easy to create a fake background
Hmm.
when you're doing pictures. And I've seen some women do this where they're supposedly in Venice and it's very clear, like, girl, you're not in Venice. That is a
Yeah.
totally AI background. And I think that is a really unhealthy
Hmm.
presentation to put out there, especially for, any girl or woman who is maybe already feeling a little bit unsecure about herself. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping that more pageant systems will, think about having their queens present themselves more authentically, just for the
Hmm.
sake of all of our mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And AI is definitely one of those tools, kind of like when social media was getting big, where there's
Hmm.
definitely benefits to it. And, there's some good uses for it. And then there's also the harms. And because it's so new, like it's just within the past year or so that it's really blown up, it's where do we find that balance? Because we don't even really know. But I will say I'm very grateful to be with an organization that focuses more on what's your brand. And if you're like, I don't wear makeup, usually it's not, oh, well, fix that. It's okay. So why don't you post with no makeup? Because that is your brand. And they're really helping young women just discover who they are and post that as opposed to creating the story of who we should be.
That's amazing. Is this pageant just for Canada or is there a international level to it?
Currently in person, there's only Canada, but they have in the past hosted personality pageants internationals. They've given out some international titles in the past, so I always recommend getting in touch with them. They also send girls internationally, so they do have, licenses for some. I know we've had North America represented. We've had personality or Miss Personality Americas. We've had different international gals, and I do recommend Sophia Leah as our director, and she's so open and honestly the most responsive director I've ever had. Like I'm like, do you sleep? Because she's always answering, and I love it, but also I'm like, Are we sleeping enough?
Yeah, directors work so hard. They I didn't know how they get their energy either. My director, she is always on it all the time, and I appreciate it as well, but I hope she's taking care of herself too.
And the director of Personality Pageants Canada, this was our fifth year. She's only 20, 21 years old. Like she is a child.
Wow.
Like I'm like, wow, like you founded this as a teen and it was her that she built this entire organization from the ground up and now it's in person. We are going into our sixth year. We just crowned, three different divisions for the first time. And to see the type of woman that it's attracting and repeat contestants, I think is just a testament to how safe people feel in this organization. And so I forget my director is that young because I'm like,
Wow.
I was not doing that at 2021.
No kidding, me neither. I was at college
Yeah.
and trying to survive my studies and
Yeah.
she's creating a pageant. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Fantastic. So tell me, what are your plans during your wonderful year coming up? What do you got on the docket?
Yeah, so I'm focusing on three aspects of the Bloom effect. So I touched a bit about personal relationship, helping women just really connect with who they are. I'm doing this with different reflective prompts and also just showing up as me and leading by example because oftentimes we say, "Oh, I'm going to help you," and then we don't do it ourselves. We don't do
Yeah.
the work. And so showing up as authentically as I can on my social media. I'm also working on different mentorship aspects. I want to create a mentorship program for women, specifically looking at Personality Pageants Canada and helping guide them through the process because it is an amazing organization, but it's unlike any other one that I've done. There are different submissions. They really do look at the whole package, but that means
Right.
there are so many different aspects that you're competing in and ways that you're presenting yourself. And so I'm creating a mentorship program for women who want to succeed in that. And then finally, I'm creating a scholarship for personal development or academic growth for women because I was very fortunate to receive over $20,000 in scholarships in university. And that is
Wow.
honestly the reason that I now have three degrees because without that, I don't know if I would have finished one. Like,
That's fantastic, Jewel. And the fact that one of your legacy projects is to help other women to achieve their academic goals. That crowns off to you, girl. That's amazing. I can't believe how quickly these half hours go. I'm so glad that you could come back and talk, not only as the new title holder, but as a married woman and sharing your story. Can you leave us with something that makes you feel fabulous now?
oh, I always have my hype up music. And that always makes me feel fabulous. And my favorite artist, this was my like divine sign. My favorite artist released their new album the night of prelims. And so that was my hype before
Yeah.
prelims. And always a good runway song, a good hype playlist always makes me feel fabulous.
Yes, I love a good playlist. It just
Oh,
puts me in a right state of mind. It's
absolutely.
everything. Jewel, I am so glad you could talk with us today. Congratulations to you again. And can you tell us where we can find you on Instagram?
Yes, so I'm at Bloom with Jewel on Instagram. You can follow me there. And I also have the Blooming Sisterhood on Facebook where I post the reflective prompts. We have monthly glow hours where we get to just celebrate ourselves. So you can find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook in the Sisterhood. And my DMs are always open unless I miss them and read them at work. And then I sometimes forget. So don't feel embarrassed to be like, hey, you, I read this a day ago.
Wonderful. I'll be sure and connect your socials with this. And thank you all for joining us here at the Fearless and Fabulous podcast. Just remember, you can thrive no matter your age or size. And we'll see you back here soon.